Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. Forbes India presents the next wave of cloud innovation in association with Google Cloud.
Hello and welcome to Forbes India and Google Cloud present the next wave of cloud innovation. I'm Gautam Srinivasan, and in this special series, we will highlight how a digital-first approach is transforming businesses and outline the larger possibilities for enterprise growth and data-driven outcomes being created by the cloud. Our focus today will be on the banking sector, where we will explore how the pandemic has reshaped thinking around the cloud, what banks are doing to consolidate data effectively to service their needs, where can they unlock more value from APIs, and how they approach security that is seamless, consistent, and granular. Now, considering the challenges that the pandemic brought with it, banks are at the forefront of innovation spanning everything from remotely operated internal workflows to branchless banking for consumers. The challenges were many, but digitalization provided them with the tools to create a new experience around money. It's safe to say that the new normal in retail banking will be far different than we ever imagined just a year ago. So I'd like to invite Shyam Govindan, partner at Deloitte India, to share an overview on the transformation taking place in the banking sector. Over to you, Shyam, for the opening keynote.
Thanks, Gautam. Transformation has been going on for years in banking, but what this pandemic has done is it's acted as a catalyst for change, and it accelerated the pace at which this transformation is happening. And if you were to look, what it has done is there used to be issues around getting the business case approved, internally aligning different team members, and doing the change management and making everybody accept internally to take a business case and move it forward. But this pandemic and the virtual way services and products need to be delivered ensured that this business case problem of aligning people was really not a big issue. Everybody realized that this has to be done. And also everyone felt the comfort that customer adoption and acceptance will move. So that's the context in terms of how the pandemic has actually accelerated the digital-led transformation in the banking space. If you were to look what is happening as a trend in a banking, we call it as granularization of portfolio. So we have been reading reports and everybody is aware that there is a larger focus from a retail segment standpoint. And this is witnessed by, if I were to look at, say, growth between 2017 to 2020, it's 1.7x the portfolio size has grown. And this is also being driven by not only the traditional products, but also small ticket loans are in focus. We know that less than 25,000 personal loan is growing in the same period at a 23x pace. And buy now, pay later products are the focus. And this being the case of granularization of portfolio, small is becoming big in terms of volume, as well as in terms of identifying the customers who would be the future potential customers. Now that's happening at a portfolio level. But if you look at what's happening on a customer front, there is a huge shift to digital. This pandemic also ensured that customers started moving to digital for their day-to-day needs. And we all know that India has nearly 500 million smartphone users, and the data consumption has gone up the roofs. 30% there is an increase in the monthly data consumption. What's also interesting is it used to be metros, tier 1 cities versus, if you look at it geographically, that used to be the focus of banks. But currently we see a large trend of more of loans and even the investment products. The origination is happening from the beyond tier 1 cities, if I were to call it. And also the ticket sizes are also not location agnostic. So at a different pin code levels, the ticket sizes seem to be the same. Another factor, we have always been talking about the demographics of the India. And if you look at for the personal loan segment, nearly 50% of the customers availing personal loan are under 30 years of age. And they are all becoming digitally savvy. What it means is they are also doing loads of research on the products, and on an average, they tend to look at least three brands before they choose a brand. They are also looking at their own local vernacular language as a medium of communication with their financial services providers. So these are the trends happening from a retail standpoint of shifting to digital. What also has happened is everybody wants a personalized experience, and they feel if I can order all the other things and get my things done on retail or healthcare or any other area sitting at my home, why can't banking be delivered in the same way? Obviously, our bankers have also gone into the innovation mode. Video KYC came in big time during this pandemic. There is a also requirement of ensuring that there is a omni-channel present. Whichever what I mean here is, if I want to deal with the bank in a virtual way or through a voice medium or with physical, it should be with ease and integrated. And the requirement is also going just not for the basic products of banking, which is beyond banking. So, for example, if I were to talk of beyond banking, if we look at the MSME, SME space, a lot of research have shown that they need three things. They are telling, can you help me save time? Can you help me save money? Can you help me grow? So it's no more the vanilla lending relationship which a banker can have. They need to go beyond banking to address these concerns of time, money, and growth. And if I were to look at corporate banking, the trend has been moving away from sort of a lending based relationship to more of transaction banking, where they are asking, can you give me a holistic view for my cash, trade, liquidity management, and treasury solutions? So that's the key trend we see from a corporate banking. Add to this complexity, if I were to look at the stickiness of the customers, are they all being loyal to the same brand? That's a question mark which is there. For example, recent research shows that 32% of customers who took a loan from a lender switched for the next loan to another lender. This is from one of the credit rating agencies. So that shows that the customers are becoming more value seeking, and there are all the other players offering some solutions or the other, which is going to challenge the banks, be it the PSPs, fintechs, or your loyalty service providers, or even for that matter, a oil and gas company coming with a payment solution. So they're spoiled for choices, and they can easily switch. However, the silver lining is uh, when you ask the customer what is the biggest thing they look forward to, trust of the bank remains the same. That's why the bank scores higher compared to all the other new entrants. This entire shift in the way the customer is behaving is also aided by the regulator and the push given by the government in terms of creating networks. We all know how UPI was a big movement in payments, and how it has grown over the last years. Now, if you look at it right now, we are telling that account aggregator, what has got gone live earlier last month, is going to be again a aha moment when it comes to lending. And the government has also created, in the plans of creating open credit enablement network, digital health stack. So it's going to be extremely data rich, and this data can transform the way the banking product services are being offered to the customers. Now, how are the banks dealing with this? So these are the trends we see are happening. How are the banks dealing with this? Uh, so I'll talk on some six areas how the banks are dealing with it. The first one is banks used to look at winning in metros. So the micro market strategy, what they do at a pin code level to assess the potential and garner what the market size is and get the market share. They are going beyond the tier one cities. It's more tier two cities and beyond. So the planning and the strategy of getting customer is going right now at a micro market at a different level across rural India too. The second area, what they are doing is, how do I give a great experience to the customers? They have a lot of broken journeys, and straight through processing is not always across all the products and processes. And how can I give a great user experience? So they are rebuilding the way they are digitally engaging with the customers, be it through internet banking, mobile banking, and so on. Third realization which has come to the banks is they can't do everything alone. particularly on the beyond banking products. And when neobanks are also coming into play, they need an ecosystem allies, be it with fintech players or be it with other large OEMs or manufacturing or retail and so on. So there is a good mix of new age ecosystem which is coming into play, and with the API playing the key role, this is going to be the way forward when it comes to banking, both for acquiring customers as well as servicing it. The other issue what the banks face, and they are trying to balance it, is security and privacy is also a key concern. Cyber security is a major area. Sometimes business as usual can take too much time to solve these issues, and they are trying to look at creating teams which can look at BAU and as well as look at future transformation. That's the way they are looking at, particularly from a security standpoint. Now we all know that the customers need hyper personalization. This can't be done without having the right set of data, both internal as well as external data in place, and use of AI and ML. And when hyper personalization, they are looking at what is the long term value or the propensity models. Can I predict in terms of the NPAs, and will the customer default or no? And can it prevent fraud? So those are the areas where a lot of data is being used right now, and uh, all this is possible because they are also moving the entire IT architecture infrastructure from a cloud standpoint, so that the scalable solutions can happen. I'll complete my thoughts with some four key challenges a full-fledged bank is facing these days. There seem to be a lot of action cutting across segments happening. So the biggest challenge the bankers are facing is where do I prioritize? What I should not do? Because there are 100 things a bank can do, but the question is what should they prioritize? That's one of the key challenges what they're thinking. The second challenge would be the legacy systems are pretty old for all our banks. Should I completely change the legacy systems, or should I build on the edges, or should I not touch it? Those are the key concerns which is going on in the banker's mind. The third is, though the customer has moved ahead with the requirement from a digital, and the customer is looking forward to changes happening not in years or quarters, but in weeks and months. This requires a new way of working, which is probably agile method of working, and the adoption of agile is still a work in progress, if I were to say, across the banks. The last but not the least, you need people to get all this done. And I'm sure everybody understands there's a big war on talent going on, particularly on the technology side. So, with these four challenges, how do they get the transformation done is a key question right now. So, Gautam, those are my thoughts, and I hand it back over to you now.
Thank you for your insight, Sham, on this transformation that has taken place in the banking sector, from their product portfolios expanding to buy now, pay later or microloan solutions, to omni-channel, hyper-personalized customer engagements, with players now focused on going beyond banking. Of course, we'll also hear from our panel on what they think about the four challenges that you stated. Do stay with us, though, to provide your view on the discussion that's about to follow. Well, it's time now to explore some of those themes in detail with our panel of industry leaders. Let me introduce them to you. Please welcome Sunil Soni, Chief GM for the Customer Acquisition, Retail Liability and Corporate Communication Division at Punjab National Bank. Dhiman Thakur, who's the head of digital banking at Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, is also with us. And joining him is Aninda Bhattacharya, head of Cloud COE and Enterprise Architecture at Axis Bank. And finally, we have with us Kiran Kesavarappu, Head of Customer Engineering, Industry Solutions and Architecture at Google. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We heard Sham give us the overview of the trends taking place. So let's expand on some of those themes. And Kiran, let's start by hearing from you about how the pandemic has reshaped thinking around the cloud, from a below-the-line conversation around scalability, security, and operational resilience, to an above-the-line thinking around syncing data across finance, risk, customer, product, and pricing to enable quicker decision and launch new products and digital experiences in the banking sector.
Thank you for the question, and I'm pleased to be here this morning with an esteemed panel. Sham did touch upon a number of topics which I thought were of topical interest to most bankers that we speak to, right? But let me focus on the aspect of cloud as the enabler for digital transformation. Almost 18 months into the pandemic, I think banks continue to deal with the subject of digital transformation in their own fashion, right? But with the bulk of all of the customer engagement going digital, we are of the opinion that there has never been a better time for banks to actively consider cloud technologies. Expecting cloud to deliver on three key hygiene expectations now: scale, security, and reliability is passé. I think it's a given, and therefore I will not touch upon the technology infrastructure layer in this four-layered representation that I sort of spoke about. But even amongst the three, which is experience, operations, and data, never before has the focus on the data layer been as intense as it has been since the pandemic set in. I think it's also important to sort of call out the fact that banks have always been data rich, but ironically information poor, right? The renewed focus on data is driven by a combination of new technologies, for example, serverless computing, or the bank's own comfort with data sciences. Shyam alluded to bench strength in a certain fashion, right? Comfort with data sciences, and it's now evidenced by banks moving beyond traditional business intelligence unit definitions. And the third part is the desire to grow their business manifold. Shyam touched upon lending as an example. There's also the realization that data is not to be seen, data and data sciences, not to be seen in isolation, but actually that layer underpins everything that needs to be done in either the operations layer or the experience layer that sits above data, right? Now, let me demystify this, right? Okay, so when technologists like us have been posed this problem statement of what can the cloud do above the line, we could think of it in many different ways, but what we have basically said is there is this growth opportunity in front of us, and cloud should essentially be the enabler, narrowed down to three functions. One, the ability to build ecosystems leveraging data, the ability to drive engagement leveraging data, and the ability to improve process leveraging data.
Interesting points there, Kiran. In fact, serving the unbanked population, that's been a key theme both for banks and for the regulators. So some of the points that you and Shyam mentioned, I'll bring it in. You said that, in terms of approaching customer engagement, it needs a new approach, and cloud enables that. And also the other situation being data rich and information poor. So how do you overcome that to serve the population, the unbanked population? So I'll bring in the rest of our panel to understand their views on this, looking at it from the lens of these 2 points. Dhimant, as more parts of the unbanked population become first-time users of formal financial services, now catering to this new customer base, it comes with its own set of challenges. The target customers for small finance banks, for example, are largely low-income households with limited access to education. So what role can the cloud play in upgrading the overall customer satisfaction index of this user base, especially in overcoming the trust deficit which stems from unsatisfactory experiences and unreliable redress of issues? Do you see an AI-driven contact center, for example, to answer these problems?
Thanks, Gautam. So, AI-driven contact center probably is one of the answers. There are many such solutions which are there, but let me address it in a way where I can explain how the journey is for especially the unbanked population. Now, most of the unbanked population starts their journey with formal banking. In case of Ujjivan, with a micro loan. Right, and this has three clear aspects rather. One is the onboarding, the other part is the service, and the third part is the collections. On the onboarding front, what we at Ujjivan do, and we are also aggressively looking at cloud as one of the strategies to go ahead. On the onboarding piece, while a lot of our journeys are digital, the emphasis is always on assisted digital, because this sort of a population is not something that we can expect to download some sort of an app in a very nice smartphone and do a self-service journey for onboarding. So it requires a lot of assisted onboarding where a certain sales individual interacts with the customer on a regular basis, gets them onboarded through a digital application form, and the entire process is then digital, where the credit underwriting and the loan account opening, etc., is done. Now, while this is done, there are a lot of services which are readily available on cloud. Something as simple as OCR, right? Rather than having that application inbuilt, in the device, we would rather use the service which is available on cloud for this, right? So these are some of the things that are really important for the unbanked population. The other aspect, one of the panelists did talk about video KYC. At Ujjivan Bank, we see video as not only a KYC platform, but much larger platform to interact with the customers, and that's where uninterrupted cloud services really help. So at Ujjivan, what we've done is, while we are using video as a channel for doing KYC, we also use this as a channel to do a personal discussion with our customers, especially in case of retail lending, let's say personal loans or home loans. You need to do property visits. You need to have a personal one-on-one discussion with the customer to understand and verify the exact location and so on and so forth. So we're using video as more than just a KYC channel, but a overall banking channel. To answer your question on AI, yes, AI is one of the things that is very important, and we are seriously exploring building an AI channel. We are on the verge of going live with that, and we are going to be using Google's translation services, because the population that we cater to requires us to service them in various languages and dialects, in fact. So that is something that we want to work closely with some of the partners to build their entire vernacular stack, so to speak. Coming to the third aspect on the collections, which I spoke about. Now that also is a very important thing, and Kiran rightly mentioned that banks are data rich but information poor. What we are doing to ensure that collections happen seamlessly, especially in the COVID era, is move away from the traditional model where our sales representative, who we call a CRO, goes and meets the customer in person and collects cash. We actually moved this entire way of collections to digital through API banking and various fintech partnerships. So today, 22% of our collections are completely digital, and that is growing, month after month. And that is something very, very unique that we have done in the industry. We are also leveraging a lot of data that we already have to do the exact analytics which Kiran talked about, where we're doing pin code or even group level based mapping. And in a group, let's say if one or two individuals are using digital modes of making their repayments, we're actually reaching out to the rest of the group and telling them that, hey, you know what, this is the guy in your group. He is, in your community, he or she is using digital modes of repayment. Why don't you use it? Because it's just so convenient. And you need not come to a center meet and put yourself at risk, especially during COVID times. So these are some of the things that we are doing, on the onboarding, on the service part, as well as on the repayments part, as far as the unbanked population for microbanking is concerned.
All right, let's focus on the data-rich information poor aspect and see how that can be resolved using the power of the cloud. And I'll bring in Sunil and Ananda for their views on this. Banks appear to be in the business of managing risk in the process of storing and distributing money, whereby the importance of digital initiatives in India will now be on using the data to serve the unbanked. For example, how do you give a credit card to someone who has no credit history? Now, from this viewpoint, Sunil and Ananda, I'd like your views on how you see AI and ML driving risk analytics to help banks gain customers who might not have shown up in the radar earlier, while enabling, say, a lower cost of prediction around credit risk modeling or loan loss ratios. Sunil, we'll start with you, and then Ananda for his views.
Right. Morning, and thank you for this opportunity. A wonderful question. Now, while you're looking at the the AI coming into picture, most of the banks have been conventionally there in the business of providing the credit card or the credit to the people, to the borrowers. But however, over a period of time, with regard to looking into the kind of delinquencies and also looking into the efficacies of recoveries, banks have actually started gradually migrating to the artificial intelligence. Now, there are two facets to this. One is with regard to the onboarding, two is with regard to the collections. So while you're looking at onboarding and specifically answering to your question where you said how the credit cards are being offered today in the absence of any credit history to the customers. Now, essentially one way is to look at the AI part, but however, since there is no history available with the bank, so the AI cannot actually be put to practice. However, a collaboration in this case comes to the fore. Now there are agencies who are actually looking into this element. More to say that they already have these tie-ups and also have this information from various different sources. Say, for example, if a customer is making use of Paytm but doesn't really have the history of the banking, or a person is also looking into making payments from a digital mode, however, yet not connected to the banking. So these are the agencies who are actually helping us in identifying such customers. At the back of it, they are making actually use of the AI. So instead of directly making use of AI by the bank, since there is no data, it is the aggregation by the agencies, and the collaboration with them helps. That is with regard to the onboarding and looking into the dispensation of the credit cards. Second is with regard to the credit also. The similar thing actually goes with the credit. And the information is actually collated by various different agencies. So these are tie-ups which are actually helping us in identifying this. So collaboration is the mantra here more than the AI directly done by the bank, since the information is not available. The information which is available with the bank is today sliced and diced. So that means the data, as is said, more data, less information, is getting converted into more information now, basis our selection pattern and various different windows. So one search, as you rightly said, is PIN code. Second is with regard to their utilization, the wallet share. Third is with regard to the age and the kind of pitching in the products which can be relevant to them as per their age bracket and the family size. So whereas there are various different formats, various different slicing and dicing which happens to identify this. Now I'd like to couple this with one more factor. Looking into the legacy of the bank that we are, about 127 years. And since the technology has been deployed over a period of time and it has not been done afresh like any of the new banks, so we have a lot of legacy to handle. So there are two things which are actually allowing us to look into this aspect. One is, can I change the technology today? How soon can I do that? And third factor is, what is the cost and the deployment time? Second aspect is, in case if I cannot, and the answer to them is big. So what is it that I can do in the shape of identifying or encapsulating the existing deployed technology and enriching it with the enveloping interaction in the shape of APIs. So I'd stop here and maybe look forward to the views of the other colleagues as well.
Absolutely. We'll explore APIs, but an interesting point that you mentioned there, the network effect of the payments revolution helping in this situation, because you can get data from there and pair it with the AI that you are using. Anindya, your thoughts on that helping, serving the unbanked folks who say don't show up on the radar when it comes to say credit or loans. You think that's the answer?
No, that's a very interesting point Sunil made, right? And I echo his thoughts, right? The ecosystem plays a vital role, but just to give you an outside-in perspective, also how it is actually disrupted, right? We have to understand that what is the typical mode by which it is done today, right? If you go to a civil kind of an industry and everything, they always look at your repayment history, credit utilization, multiple inquiries, number of loans payable, credit mix, so and so forth, right? But if you see how the world is evolving, just to give some of the example, One of the UK prop tech firm has developed a tool allowing credit agencies such as Experian to incorporate rent payment history into the credit scoring model. In Singapore, I have followed actually a bank which is actually using a social media and mobile phone data to determine individuals' credit worthiness. A US-based agency use a passporting kind of a concept, right, to profile international students, right, and gathering data from international credit bureaus, right. So these are all actually examples how the data is now getting made available to kind of drive this innovation on this particular thing, right. Now there are a couple of technology strategies what we have to also think about to couple with it, right, because the data availability is very important, but there are two main factors I think which is also helping with this emerging technology. We are in the era of a hype cycle where we are saying is that the AI can be also explainable, right, so that necessarily when I take a decision, the bias, the scoring, etc on that particular decision can be explainable, which is helping, which will be helping a lot of on the regulatory case, etc. And putting my hat as an enterprise architect, what I will say is that just to build and probably wordsmith what Kiran said, it is obviously data rich always, right? But it is actually a strategy poor, hence information poor. If I actually expand that particular line, right? Just to give you an example, we have all the necessary data from our clickstream analytics, all our patterns around how customer is coming, even unauthenticated and everything, right? But we need to create a necessary wiring to kind of flow the data to a big data lake kind of a structure and make it available first of all, and then build a use case, right? And that's where the proper data modeling, that's where the proper data classification, not to help in with the personalization or only on the business perspective, but also regulatory, security, etc aspect also, it's a key. So one thing necessarily what we are thinking, and what is actually changing as an emerging tech is that how to build that strategic layer and the data driven layer in the inception of the data and the data stores, and taking it to fulfill to make it as an information is really the key. So that's my point of
Mm.
view.
That's a great overview. You've given us use cases and, of course, the way that Axis Bank works to solve this issue of being data rich and information poor. But as Sunil mentioned about APIs, I'd like to explore more on that. APIs have helped banks open up their doors for inventive solutions. So I'll get a view from Sunil and Ananda on this. The fact that how do incumbent banks with legacy infrastructure, something Sunil mentioned, effectively transition to an API-led infrastructure ecosystem in partnership with various fintechs, and in the process make this ecosystem symbiotic without worrying about their fintech partners leveraging that data they get from the bank to build competing solutions servicing customer needs which say the bank is yet to service. For example, say a fintech partner layering financial management or analysis over account information if the bank does not provide that service. So I'd like to understand from both of you, does this necessitate product-led thinking when it comes to open banking? Sunil, we'll come to you first for your views, and then Ananda.
Well, as you've rightly said, today with legacy at hand and with the burden of switching or looking into speedy deployments, which is the hyper personalization that we are looking at, and the kind of impatient behavior. I won't say impatient. I would say rather the requirements of the customers are actually changed today, and they're looking at a speedier disposal of whatever they would want to have. So with that thing in mind, looking into or carrying the burden of legacy, as I said, there are two ways to look at it. One, whether can I totally replace? Looking into the aspect that it is not very easy to replace the legacy as well. So it is basically to see how can I actually enrich the offerings to the customers by encapsulating, enveloping my existing services in the shape of the APIs. Now, there are two facets to it that you've raised, Gautam. One is with regard to how the data can be used, and secondly, how the data can be protected as well. So there are two sides to the same coin here. One is with regard to the fact that the data, how much data is expected to be handed over, and how much handshake is required to actually look at effectively making use of the services. So API has actually come handy specifically with regard to this. One, encapsulating the or protecting the information that we generally provide And second is with regard to the consumption of relevant information to the advantage of the bank. So this is how probably at this point of time the APIs are being used to differentiate the services, to hyper personalize the offerings, and essentially looking into what product is expected to be offered to whom specifically.
Ananta, let me get your thoughts too on transitioning into an API-led infrastructure ecosystem. And while Sunil covered it, the data sharing with fintech partners from a privacy perspective, I want to look at it also from a business perspective, right? So if you as a bank are not agile enough to come up with new products, but your fintech partner can use your data and come up with better products, then you are in a tricky position. So how do you resolve that?
No, so basically, see, the future of banking, in our opinion, in my opinion, is obviously invisible, right? It's baked in on other journeys to drive indirect growth, right? That is how we have to look at it, right? And see, and there is probably a lot of it is already happening. What we need to bank on. If I give you a quick example of a big banking consortium, right, called Bayan, right? Most of us have heard it, right? Banking Industry and Architecture Network. They are building actually globally service landscapes and everything to kind of solve that particular problem, that how the capabilities, API-led capabilities would look like for a bank, right? To partner well. So couple of things, by the way, what the bank needs to be careful about is that, as Sunil also mentioned, we build system over ages, right? And it's not easy to rip it off to kind of make it really API first in all the layers. But two things comes into my mind. Whatever we are building now, right, it needs to be very API first. It needs to be governed by a practical site reliability engineering practices to bake in the entire resiliency, SLI, SLO, SLAs in the journeys, right? And on the core perspective over there, you have to modernize it probably by using some of the hollowing out the core and CQRS patterns and everything what popularly people are using. But my response to your question is that the banking need to be invisible, will be invisible, baked in different journeys so that we can drive direct and indirect growth. So we modernize, we partner, but we also help the ecosystem to leverage our capabilities.
All right, banking that is invisible. That's the way to go. Dhimant, let me get you in also for your thoughts on this question. What would you have to say?
Thanks, Gautam. Well, very pertinent observations and questions by the panelists. Let us just clearly understand the facts here. When it comes to fintech partnerships, API infrastructure is something which is required. But let's also understand, why do these fintechs exist in the first place? If banks were providing solutions for onboarding small merchants and taking care of their basic accounting, why would a fintech like a Pagar book or a Khata book exist? If there was a very simple solution for me to pay my credit card bills, rent, education fees, so on and so forth, why would somebody like a Cred come into the picture? So there's a clear, space where fintechs operate, and we also need to understand that they are powered by the banking partnerships that they have, right? And therefore, they are entitled to their part of the data and their part of the hard work that they do to bring those customers on board. And yes, some part of the data and the customer set, even banks, have a ownership of. So it is sort of a co-ownership thing. I don't think banks need to be threatened by that. There is always a way of learning from all these fintechs, and that's what I would like to bring in my perspective. What Ujjivan Bank has done. One of the first things that we did is we built an entire API stack. So today our entire bank is available on 159 APIs that we built. With this, not only are we able to grow inorganically with fintech partnerships, we are also able to provide customers with solutions or product offerings which would take a lot of time for us to develop on our own. And this is something which is a differentiating factor, which is there in the market as far as Ujjivan Bank is concerned. I earlier mentioned collections, right? We could do this only because we have an API stack and we have API partnerships in place, and it is of mutual benefit rather than benefit only to the fintech or to the bank. So that was the perspective which I wanted to add.
Sure, it's you see it evolving more as a symbiotic relationship and a learning experience for the banks, seeing what fintechs do. And let's see how that evolution progresses and how the power of the cloud helps both both sides of the game, understand the customer better and service them better. Kiran, I'll come to you. For large banks, another issue, data is spread across environments in structured and unstructured formats. So how can they effectively consolidate data to leverage it effectively to their needs? What's your view on this?
Yes, it is a fact that banks have large amounts of data. The distinction between structured and unstructured formats is fairly clear now. The unstructured content perhaps growing faster in the form of application forms, KYC documents, invoices, voice calls, etc., right? The challenge today is that large banks have dealt with these two forms of data in a fairly disparate manner, stored in their own silos and devoid of a common mechanism by which the unified intelligence from both these data sets can be derived as insights. And just to give some statistics here, and I mean, I could be off the mark by a few points, but broadly I should be in the ballpark, which is that 20% of the data at the bank today is structured, 80% is unstructured. And historically, as in between 2010 and 2020, the decade that went past, structured data may have grown twice over, but unstructured data has actually grown 4 to 6 times, right? And that is unlikely to go down anytime soon, right? So apart from this growing complexity of data and the abnormal growth of unstructured data, the second challenge that banks also face is the time to insights. Anindya referred to sort of streaming data and clickstream data, right? It's the ability to process that to derive insights. The technologies at the bank were actually designed and optimized to run what we call batch processes, right? And those are technologies that can't scale or run in a manner where insights are delivered in near real time. It's almost analogous to one watching a Netflix, series and being provided with a real-time recommendation based on what one is watching a few minutes ago, right? So the ability for banks to get to that level is a challenge in itself. Now, given that we've called out the types of data storage and the ability to derive insights in almost real time are the two sets of challenges. I just wanted to go back a bit in time and look at the evolution of technology, since your question was very pointed around how banks are solving for it, right? So we had these enterprise data platforms at bank, which is not a new topic. They've been around, at least in India, since mid 2000s or early 2000s, who have had large data warehousing environments, for example, but they cater to a set of use cases such as reporting, low latency querying. They did that very well. But then as data volumes began to grow, especially structured data, these enterprise data platforms couldn't be scaled without exponential rise in costs. And therefore, banks started looking at data lakes, a new piece of technology. And sort of to buttress the point about Google, we were the ones who originally built the technology that underpins data lakes. And there were research papers published by Google way back in 2002, 2004. A decade passed, around 2011, 2012 is when the organizations that were setting up these large data lake environments came to Google, and Google sort of realized that data lakes also had their own problems. So for those who believe that a data lake is a panacea to the problem, it isn't so, right? Why? Because it couldn't handle low latency querying. It couldn't handle updates on data, etc., right? So this realization led the research teams at Google, and for the benefit of everyone, I mean, we run one of the largest consumer-facing data-powered AI embedded experiences, right? Like YouTube and Google Search and all of those, right? And that was basically a piece of research that was called Dremel, which combined the best of both worlds, the ability for a user to query large data sets very fast, but also to scale infinitely. And this is what we offer today as cloud technology to our enterprise customers.
All right, let's extend that discussion from managing data to managing applications. And I'll bring in Dhiman for his view. Dhiman, the average enterprise has 900 applications, for apps from the lens of, say, edge versus core or building and operating resilient apps. It's hard, and it's especially true for distributed apps, which might contain many layers of infrastructure, networks, and services. So do you see this is where the true power of the cloud come through since it enables a seamless experience?
Sure, definitely. I am in 100% agreement, Gautam, that yes, cloud comes to the rescue on that. While we've seen a lot of banks and BFSI institutions moving systematically towards cloud infrastructure, over the next 3 to 5 years, I see that these institutions will be completely migrating their at least their peripheral applications to cloud, and slowly, seriously thinking on how the critical applications, even core banking, as a matter of fact, be moved to cloud. One of the other things that cloud brings to the picture is the resilience. Physical infrastructure has its limitations in terms of uptime and so on and so forth. And recently, we have seen some banks and or part of some banks where some applications have been affected. So cloud does bring in that resilience. And in fact, whenever there is some innovation to be done, especially on the side of data analytics, etc. Cloud does provide that infrastructure to isolate, the innovation application from the rest of it, to do a quick, turnaround, do a quick pilot and test it among the customers, and then scale it up as part of the mainstream application. So yes, I see. I'm very bullish on the cloud infrastructure taking over. I'm putting a timeline of about 3 to 5 years, but it could be a bit more. That's my view.
All right, let me get in Ananda as well for his perspective on this question. Ananda, your thoughts?
Sure, sure. So see, the thing is that the beauty of if you compare the provisioning aspect in the on-prem data centers and everything, and what goes in on that particular part, and compare with the cloud, right? So cloud strives to build the entire provisioning on hypervisors through APIs, right? We are talking about a lot of API based ecosystem and how API powered, right? A good example is actually is with the CSPs, right? What we have to understand, right? How they orchestrate. Which is then triggered from either a console or a command line interface or an infrastructure as a code scripting components like Terraform or CloudFormation. Given the other cloud providers, they have their own means. Now, one thing very important, not only you are gaining the business agility, that you are avoiding physical deployments which take 15, 30, 60 days, right? And in pandemic, it actually got stretched. Uh, on top of that, you are accessing the networking, cabling, cooling, etc., right? Uh, you can also bake in the standard set of engineering and security best practices through this entire automation pipeline, right? Be it tagging for your entire observability of an infrastructure, the security rules, what you want to actually promote across your infrastructure to drive micro-segmentations on the networking and everything. Your compliance agent, the necessity of utilizing a golden image. If you can think about it in the common set of infrastructure of the 900 applications, what you have to manage, maintain, instantiate again and again and again, it is completely templatized for you, right? So that's a big deal. That's a big deal because it's cutting all the operational challenges for you so that you can focus only on what is most important for you, that's delivering to business.
All right. Let me get in Sunil for another aspect of this discussion. We had mentioned skills and an agile workforce, and of course, a digital workforce is going to be very important for banks. And considering banks need to meet revenue targets, improve customer experience, meet regulatory norms, and at the same time reduce costs. So, Sunil, how can a digital workforce, in your opinion, using say automation powered by the cloud, help in reducing costs and improve overall efficiency and profitability levels?
I may not have the exact numbers. However, what I can also tell you is that, while looking at the requirement of the digital workforce, it is coming to the fore for the last almost 4 to 5 years now. And there has been an iteration also looking into the fact that there is dearth of talent, and also, people are kind of getting an opportunity elsewhere. So that is why they're moving across. However, what I can also tell you, threadbare, is that while we are looking at returns, and while we are also looking at profitability, and while we are also looking at each factor contributing its own share, essentially looking into a conventional methodology of doing business, it requires a lot of a number of people, a number of technologies which are there in the offing. and also the cost that generally when you spend, and if you capitalize, the return on investment is less in comparison to the investments what you now would make on the cloud, and it makes the returns faster. So that's the viewpoint here.
All right, let's also talk about security, and I'll bring in Kiran in for his viewpoint. Kiran, the RBI has provided guidelines around digital payment security controls to strengthen the digital payments architecture and improve security, control, and compliance among banks, gateways, wallets, and other non-banking entities. Now, industry leaders see the need for thinking about security not just from the bank's perspective, but also the entire financial ecosystem perspective. So, in your opinion, how should banks and the broader financial ecosystem deal with security challenges, especially say if 5G comes in the next 2 to 3 years as the form factor of transaction between banks and customer themselves change? What's your view?
Okay, this is a fairly wide subject, but let me put the focus on to something that is also associated with security, which is fraud detection, right? So the RBI directives on digital payment security controls actually place a strong emphasis on fraud detection, for example, right? And therefore the linkage back to wallets, gateways, and stuff like that. There's a greater need here, like in the space of data and analytics, for banks to leverage advanced AI/ML based fraud defense mechanisms. I did allude to anomaly detection as a piece of capability that banks could leverage in doing this, right? But the aspect of security now needs to transcend just the bank into the overall financial ecosystem, as no fraud detection system based on data from a single participant can actually come close to the effectiveness of one that uses data from all of these participants, right? And there is this implicit restriction around computing power and capabilities, right? That can be solved for now by going to the cloud, right? So when you now combine the compute power that you gain through cloud combined with the 5G capabilities that are now getting rolled out, this will enable multi-layered security that might combat cybersecurity, fraud risks, and like I think all of us have been saying, the form factor being the mobile device, the ubiquitous delivery experience delivery platform. Now, 5G by itself, right? I'm not the telecom expert here, but 5G by itself, with its increased bandwidth and low latency, will enable the financial ecosystem to build what we call immersive and engaging customer experiences in video, vernacular, voice, the 3 Vs that sort of Google has been championing a cause for across the channels, right? So you deliver an immersive, engaging experience with the 3 Vs across channels, further blurring what we call the divide between the real world, the physical brick and mortar setup, and the digital identities. Here, I think financial institutions need to rethink their security strategy by putting the customer at the center. For example, trust. I mean, money is about emotions. Money is about trust. And this has to be front and center of the strategy. This has traditionally been between users and the bank, right? But by making use of attestations of third parties, you can provide a better digital footprint of the user's digital footprint and the real world identity, right? So there is the ability for banks to leverage technology to securely delegate trust across the wider ecosystem. Other aspect is user privacy, right? So when we talk about these frameworks from the regulator, we also talk about user privacy, and this is something that has been touched upon in various legislative forums, bills, and debates. So I'm not going to touch upon that in a lot of detail, but suffice to say that this will likely become the norm, right? So instead of a bank saying, give me your bank statements, they might like to invoke the account aggregator model that comes with its own checks and balances, respecting privacy, user privacy, leverages a consent framework, and so on and so forth. So when banks build API infrastructures, I'm sure people have to take care of this element, not just the ability to transport data between the ecosystem participants. So this won't just enhance the security of transactions, but also provide the privacy framework and the guardrails required. So I think the 5G element is something that I have lightly touched upon, but suffice to say it is a catalyst in all of the aspirations financial services has in India.
All right. Ananta, your response to the points that Kiran has raised.
Just to add on what Kiran mentioned, right, especially on the 5G. See, look, with 5G, it will be about protecting data and assets in edge, right? Because we'll be pushing it to edge for harnessing the computing powers in the edge, right? And there will be a big push in digital payments, IoT, wearables, VR, AR adoption from an omni-channel perspective, right? So the point of view is that again, like industry should not try at least to reinvent the wheel, rather than look forward to partner with CSPs and edge computing options who already, if you think, manages the data protection, DDoS prevention at edge, and also provide CSP backbone to reduce the latency and increase resilience, right? That's the point I just wanted to throw out.
All right, let's bring it all in together before we wrap up the discussion. Kiran, how can the cloud be leveraged to improve customer experiences at different stages in the journey, right from creating brand awareness to buying products or services and evaluations about the quality of the service? And how do large banks make sure that they don't miss out on recognizing and deciphering the signals that customers leave behind in their digital journeys?
Okay, I have a very simple representation for what should be done, which is a three part life cycle representation, right? The first one is the suspect to the prospect journey, when a bank doesn't even know who the prospect is, but then we have over invested perhaps into Salesforce automation technologies, right? So the first part is understanding the micro markets, the pin code level data that many of the panelists have been referring to understand what the funnel would look like. Experience actually begins from there, right? So that's the first part. The second part is the prospect to the customer journey. This is at the heart of most origination platforms, and there is so much that technologies in the cloud can do to deliver a great experience. Now, at one end of that spectrum is embedded finance, where there isn't the concept of an origination. It's pretty much seamless. And the other end of the extreme, you have assisted journeys that Demant has referred to, Mr. Soni has referred to, right? But both of them now require a number of friction points to be removed, right? So that's the prospect to the customer journey. And the last part is customer to advocacy. So at the outset, if all of us would recollect the points made by Shyam about sachetization of lending, about the market beyond urban India, where a lot of prime credit is now bubbling up, right? There is a need for us to look at the threat that is being posed to banks around coming from the fintech and the NBFC space, right? So banks, if they have tried solving for these three parts in the life cycle in isolation of each other, clearly there is a need for banks to now look at this in a comprehensive manner, because the journeys actually span all three for a customer, right? And a number of data points, that sort of interesting data points that Shyam was referring to, right? For example, there is a 64 times growth in the borrowers taking small loans repeatedly from the same fintech NBFCs in 2020 versus 2017, right? What does this mean? This implies that there is a need to tap into expanded audiences, understand the market that the opportunity lies in, and not just the markets where the branches reside, right? So there is that clear need to transcend physical boundaries.
Absolutely. It's always a learning experience. And of course, during the course of this series, we'll be hearing from leaders across sectors as we hear views from, say, the fintech sector or the media sector on how they leverage the cloud to get ahead. But meanwhile, let me get in Shyam to give us his summary of the discussion with the key highlights which he thinks have reshaped the discussion around the use and impact of the cloud in the new normal which the banking sector in India now operates in. Over to you, Shyam.
Thanks, Gautam. So, at least in summary, three things stand out from what we heard from the panelists. One is data is going to be the key to serve underbanked or new to credit customers, or even for personalization. So, data, both structured and unstructured, is going to be the key. That's very clearly established by all. The second is it's no more about saying that I will do it all alone. You need an ecosystem. You need fintech partnerships. You need to collaborate with people. Some places you will be acquiring on your own. Some places you will be a invisible banker, like our panelists put it across. So ecosystem fintech play are here to stay, and API is the way forward. So there is almost all the banks are building that path to API leadership. So that's here to stay. The third, in summary, if I were to tell, cloud is going to be the great enabler in the sense that it's going to bring in resilience, all the security factors which had been spoken about. Those three were clearly laid out. And that's where I would summarize and back to Gautam.
All right, Shyam. Cloud, the great enabler. Indeed, banks, they need to assess all of their products, services, and processes to identify potential gaps in customer journey and possible elimination of physical interactions to further enhance digital capabilities. And this is where the power of the cloud comes in. And with that, we come to the end of this very insightful discussion titled Forbes India and Google Cloud present the next wave of cloud innovation. I'd like to thank all the panelists for sharing their insights and lessons in excellence on the topic. And of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Till next time, this is Gautam Srinivasan signing off.
Forbes India presents the next wave of cloud innovation in association with Google Cloud. Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.